Des, you became president of the ITOA earlier this year. How is the year panning out for your members?
Well, Owen, this year's been a bit surreal initially. COVID restrictions were lifted in March this year and international visitors. And this was after 2 years of extended lockdowns, both domestic and international. During these 2 years, ITOA members went into survival mode. This was actually a phenomenon across the industry, from the travel agent to the tour operator to the supplier, all trying, just to survive. And then when restrictions finally lifted, which was quite immediate in the end, it happened quite quickly, there was huge excitement across the industry and a huge appetite to get back to business as usual. But it's been anything but normal as the season's got underway.
Yeah. So those 2 years of COVID, because you're dependent on international visitors, there was virtually no business on the books.
I wouldn't say there was no business on the books, but definitely there was no business delivered in 2020 and 2021. But ITOA members brought greater than 550 million in business to Ireland in 2019. And given that 2020 was initially expected to be an even better year pre-COVID, there was a significant book of business brought forward by the members, which was then deferred into 2022. And given this large book of existing business, which represented approximately 45% of what will be our full year performance, the fact that ITOA members had nurtured the key partner relationships in the marketplace during this time, it's allowed members to capture additional bookings for 22 from, what was pent up demand and customers with built up savings. These elements combined to deliver probably around 60 to 70+% of 2019 levels. And, it's positioned Ireland to have a greater than expected recovery year in 22. Yeah. And I suppose while all this is very positive, this volume of business has brought with it key challenges.
And those challenges are around sourcing accommodation, car hire, guides, all the stuff we're hearing about, is it?
Absolutely, all the stuff you're hearing about. The key challenges, they're really to do with the fact that businesses are starting from a position of no demand and then having to scale up to meet this larger demand, much larger than they expected for this travel season, and in a very short period of time. And some of those challenges, that you've mentioned, capacity is quite a large one. We've staffing challenges, and there is an extended COVID hangover. If I look at the capacity challenges around the supplier base, there's insufficient hotel rooms. We've all seen the headaches at Dublin Airport with delays, queuing, cancelled flights. We've a significantly depleted pool of tour directors. The travel industry is no longer seen as an attractive profession in that regard. There's new reservation procedures been implemented at attractions that were put in place to suit the COVID environment, but have become restrictive. And, initially at the start, restaurants had limited their group sizes to 6. And, we bring in much larger group sizes to 6. So that was a challenge as well.
Yeah. And demand is strong. There are supply challenges, but obviously, the job, if you like, of the tour operator is to overcome them. Are certain markets performing better than others? And those supply issues, do you envisage them sort of working themselves out over time? Or do you think they'll be around into next year?
I do think some of them will be around into next year. But I suppose when I talk about the markets, when you take the key markets of North America, Europe, GB, and long haul from Australia and New Zealand, the North American market is performing much better than the others. The GB market has benefited from a large book of existing business for both corporate and conference activities. Germany and France have started a bit slower, but the long haul market seems very tentative about traveling internationally. We can definitely see a correlation between the severity and length of COVID restrictions and lockdowns and the willingness or bullishness of the client to travel. If we take North America as an example, the US market remained pretty open during COVID, whereas Canada was more restrictive. And we've seen a difference in how these two markets are recovering, with the US outperforming the Canadian market. And we can also apply this logic to the French and German markets, which have started a bit slower, but interestingly now have a shorter lead time between booking and travel. I suppose the positive in this, Owen, is that for US clients coming to Ireland, they tend to spend more on their vacation, they tend to spend more in destination, they tend to stay longer, and they travel more regionally, so they're spreading their love outside of Dublin.
They're a great market. And the great thing with the tour operator, I always find, is you have a longer view of if you like, the world than other people. So are you able to see into 2023? Will that strong American business still be there next year, or, after the pent-up demand and the deferred bookings, and what with Ukraine and inflation and interest rates? I mean, do your members, are they confident about, say, the US market and indeed other markets into next year?
There's definitely a bullishness of the US client to travel. They definitely want to travel, and there's been a hiatus there for them of traveling internationally. They do have additional savings, but it's very hard to project the next couple of years. And I do think, if you're talking about a full recovery, it's still some time away. But we don't really know what's going to happen in the next few years. We've got the current inflation levels. We've an impending cost of living crisis. I can tell you that I certainly think next year is going to be very tough.
And Des, the input costs that are soaring at the moment for Irish tourism, are you seeing evidence of that?
Absolutely, Owen. There's a significant change in that cost base. The group product itself offers clients value for money. And in the whole, I believe Ireland is still well positioned competitively at the moment and offers great value for money for the international tourist. But we must ensure that remains the case. Because there's some sustainability challenges in that. Inflation is wreaking havoc for suppliers. Inflated energy costs, food costs are rising fast, and this also impacts, staff and employees needing higher wages to survive. And additionally, there's a sizable amount of hotel capacity has been taken out of the stock in key travel locations. And while we understand that this is necessary action to support an evolving Ukrainian crisis, it's important that we need to look for a medium-term solution, as these challenges are all adding to an upward pressure on prices, which is at risk of making Ireland uncompetitive.
And of course, we have the budget coming up in Ireland in late September, so that's an important issue.
Yeah, the growth of the market and future business is all a product of past business. It's very much a referral system, and it's so important that investment is there. Our members in 2019 spent, I think it was 12.5 million on marketing investment in our core markets. And this represents about a third of what Tourism Ireland marketing spend is in the same year. So it's so important that that spend is there and that we can commit that into markets and drive our message and drive the message of Ireland to get our visitors back. So we need to ensure that there's appropriate levels of investment to support what is Ireland's largest indigenous industry, biggest regional employer, and also resides in the export sector. Yeah,
absolutely. I hear to that. And you mentioned inflation earlier and the costs of business and all that sort of stuff. So, that leads me on to the subject of value for money and competitiveness. And, we in the industry are rightly concerned that Ireland retains its value for money proposition, but that's challenging when costs are constantly going up. Are you getting any feedback from members or indeed even from your own CIE tours clients as to, has Ireland retained its value? How important is that, particularly to your sector?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Owen. Competitiveness and value have always been important to Ireland's tourism offering, and no more so than now. We have to remember this is an export industry, and Destination Ireland has a lot of competition. However, Ireland has always punched above its weight in value. This can be clearly seen through our visitor feedback, in which Ireland always exceeds the client's expectations. And there's been a negative narrative in the press at the moment about the increased expense of travel in Ireland. And while there are definitely exceptions out there and unrealistic and sometimes ruthless pricing, on the whole, Ireland is still a great value destination for the international visitor.
Des, listen, I know you're there for 2 years as ITOA President. Hopefully COVID will not reemerge, and your presidency will chart the recovery of Irish tourism. So best of luck to you and all your members.
Great, thanks, Owen. I appreciate that.
Great, thanks.